5 conferences. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, talking up the game we love each and every day. Here we are with analysis like no other. All right. So I see the comments in the comments section of both the videos and the live streams that we do arguing conferences. Who's got the best conference? How would we rank the 5 Power 5 conferences? And is there a group of 5 conference that could possibly be better, especially this season, than a Power 5 conference? So each and every offseason, what I do is I take all the results of all the non-conference games between the Power 5 teams. I seed every conference 1 through 10, 12, or 14. And then I come up with a metric system to evaluate the games played. If you've seen it before, I think people enjoy it. It makes sense. Is it perfect? No, but it makes a whole lot of sense. And we put the games into context. We're going to do something similar, but I'm not putting a metric to it right now. We still have about 20 to 25% of the non-conference games still yet to be played. But through the first 3 weeks of the season, we've seen enough out of the non-conference games to get a bit of a feel as to what conferences are the best and to the worst in the Power 5. This was not a difficult decision. This is the worst conference in the Power 5, to the point that a viewer made a comment a few days ago of whether I would rank the American Conference above this conference. And you see the conference in the title. It's the ACC. I may have to dig a little bit deeper into that analysis because I think it's a valid point, and it may actually be true. Right now, we're just going to look at the ACC. These are the cold, hard facts for the ACC right now. The ACC is 2-7 against the other Power 5 conferences. And when I say Power 5, I mean the other 4 leagues. Plus, you have to make a judgment call here. Notre Dame is clearly a Power 5. Is BYU a Power 5? I put BYU in the Power 5 classification. It's a bit of a close call, certainly based on the way that they've played year to year typically. And this year against the likes of Utah, Tennessee, and USC, I think that they are legitimately a Power 5 team. Just because you're in the Power 5, are you automatically better than all the Group of 5 teams? Obviously, that's not the case. I would judge that about 80% of the Power 5 is better than the entire Group of 5, and then there's a mixture of teams. Obviously, there are some outliers like Boise State and UCF that are better than probably all but 15 to 25 of the Power 5 teams. So there's an overlap there. But you get a good understanding of us looking at a closed experiment when we just look at the Power 5 games first and foremost. So the ACC is only 2-7 against the Power 5, 11-1 against the Group of 5. We'll dig into that in just a second. There is a loss in there against the FCS. That is pretty bad. Against the current top 25, not the one that actually makes sense, but the AP top 25 that I don't put a whole lot of stock in, especially this time of year. But there is some relevance there. There is some information that can be gathered that means something. The ACC is 1-5 against the top 25, and you can guess what team won that one game. All right, there have been some huge games, obviously. Clemson beating Texas A&M, not just beating Texas A&M. So let's now put those numbers into context. Clemson manhandling Texas A&M. It wasn't a blowout on the scoreboard, 24-10, but A&M got the cheap touchdown at the end that meant nothing, and Clemson completely controlled that game. So that is a dominant win for the best team in the ACC, but let's consider that Texas A&M is probably more like the 4th, 5th, 6th best team in the SEC. It remains to be seen. They've got a date against Auburn this week. That's going to be unveiled soon. But Texas A&M, a quality team. I think they're about the 10th best team in the country. So this is a really good win for the ACC, but it comes from the gold standard. And we know what happens to the rest of the conference, that there's a chasm, a monstrosity of a chasm between Clemson and everybody else in the ACC, unlike any other conference by far. So good win for the ACC, but that's to be expected. Florida State loses to a Group of 5 in Boise State. Boise State's a quality Group of 5, legitimately a top 25-30 team in the nation. Florida State had an 18-point lead in that game. They blew it at home. They were a touchdown favorite. That's not a horrible loss for the conference, but it's not a good loss. And certainly, and there are good losses. When you're making an evaluation, there are good losses. If Oregon State went to Ohio State and lost by a field goal, that would be a good loss for the Pac-12, for example. Miami and Florida, toss-up game. Game went to the wire. Hard-fought game. Two evenly matched teams. And Florida is ranked in the top 10, so maybe this is a decent loss for the ACC. It's understandable, certainly. Neutral site went right down to the last play of the game, and Miami lost basically by one play. It was that close. The teams were indistinguishable. So this is an okay loss for the ACC. It's not a good loss. You would like to go out there and beat the other Power 5 teams, and especially a rivalry, but we're not getting into the rivalries. Miami losing to Florida, understandable loss, not a mark against the ACC there. Really the only good showing for the ACC in non-conference play, there's been one good showing because all of these group of 5 wins are meaningless. They're hollow. You know, everybody has beaten group of 5 teams, and they've not beaten any good group of 5 teams. There are no wins against group of 5 teams that really matter. The one good win for the ACC that was a surprise at the time was, of course, North Carolina as a 12-point underdog beating South Carolina. Now that win is lessening as we go, as South Carolina is going to get beat up in this schedule that they have. But it's a good win for the ACC, with North Carolina showing that they've got a pulse, and even more than that, winning the next week, that North Carolina is a decent team, and they went out and beat a mid to lower tier SEC team. So it was a quality win for the conference. Okay, the bad losses, get ready to make a list here. The Citadel beat Georgia Tech. That shouldn't happen. We know Georgia Tech is rebuilding, restructuring. Jeff Collins is probably going to do a good job there. Probably. But it's going to take some time. And right now, Georgia Tech's a mess. They lost to the Citadel. Syracuse goes out and loses to Maryland by 43 points. Syracuse was a ranked team. They lost to a mid to lower tier Big Ten team by 43 points. And that Big Ten team then lost to Temple. So that's a horrible loss. Again, had it been by a touchdown, a field goal, that would be understandable. But Syracuse lost by 43 points to Maryland. This last weekend, Boston College losing at home to Kansas, who had just lost to Coastal Carolina. Boston College, a mid-tier, a team that went 5-3 in the ACC last year, a team that went 7-5 in the conference, that was expected to do just about the same. So we're talking about a mid to upper tier ACC team expected losing to one of the dregs of college football, Kansas, who hadn't won a Power 5 road game, not just non-conference, anywhere in the conference, anywhere, for 11 years. Boston College loses by 24 points to Kansas. That's awful for the ACC. Even though it's not a loss, Florida State being taken to overtime and losing, winning, it feels like a loss. Every time I say it, I think it comes out of my mouth that Florida State lost the game. They won by 1 point against Louisiana Monroe in overtime on a missed PAT. That's embarrassing. North Carolina State took on a West Virginia team that was completely mauled at Missouri, that the week before in their opener only put 20 points on James Madison, 20-13. That West Virginia team, as a near double-digit underdog, beat North Carolina State by 17 points. So the ACC is just mounting ugly games. All right, do they have time to redeem themselves? Well, of course, Clemson can redeem the entire conference by winning it all again, to a certain extent. Not to me, not to the smart fan, but to the masses. Yeah, Clemson won. Okay, the ACC's fine. All right, what is left for the ACC? All those traditional Thanksgiving weekend games against the SEC. We could probably project right now, though, that they're going to lose 3 of those 4 games. So you get this Clemson-South Carolina matchup. That should be a win for the ACC, of course. Then after that, Florida State. Well, unless Florida State improves decidedly or Florida really takes a step back without Felipe Franks, that's a loss for the ACC. Georgia Tech, mark it down, loss for the ACC. Louisville, Kentucky, most likely a loss for the ACC, although Louisville's getting better. Kentucky's not going to be quite as good as they were last year, but still, Kentucky right now appears to be a much better team than Louisville. So that's going to be a rough go for the ACC. Add on to this, Pitt is playing UCF this weekend. 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. I don't think it was last year. Maybe it was last year. Pitt played UCF and lost 48-14. If we get a similar result with Pitt losing to UCF that badly, which look at UCF and Stanford last week, and then on top of that, Notre Dame plays Virginia, Virginia Tech, Boston College, and Duke. Well, I'm very intrigued to see Virginia play Notre Dame. But to a lesser extent, Virginia Tech, Boston College, and Duke should be losses for the ACC. And as a side note, North Carolina cannot look past Appalachian State. So in terms of Power 5 matchups, the way it projects right now, if all the favorites win, Clemson's going to win that game against South Carolina. The ACC is going to lose all those other games. I think they'll probably break through. Somebody's most likely against Notre Dame, possibly, maybe Virginia. The other teams don't have much of a shot. The ACC could finish 3-14 against the Power 5. That's what we're looking at with the ACC right now. Clemson is arguably the best team in the country. Then nobody else is in sight. Who's the second best team in the ACC right now? Virginia? Wake Forest? The talent would say Miami or Florida State. They're not playing like it. I would say Virginia is the second best team in the ACC. A possible second or third best team in the ACC, North Carolina State, just lost to West Virginia by 17 points. This conference has Clemson and no other legitimate top 25 teams. Virginia's on the fringe. And then after that, a bunch of teams that you would rank somewhere around 40 to 50 in the country. Unless something dramatically changes, and pretty much it can't. Time has run out. They're going to play in the conference against each other. And then that final weekend, aside from these games against Notre Dame. So the ACC is the worst conference in the Power 5. And again, I appreciate and very much validate a comment and question from a viewer recently about the American Conference versus the ACC. I'll have to look a little bit deeper into that. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. If you want my weekly predictions, what you can do this week, starting on Thursday, so hold off until Thursday, you will dial the keyword football to 474747. I had to read that. 474747. Keyword football. You get all my predictions for week 4. Or you can make it easy on yourself. Just grab the link in the description section below next to the term Voice of College Football. It says Voice of College Football. There's a link right there. You sign up, and you get the predictions and a whole lot of other content that we're planning and have already delivered at our Voice of College Football community. We will see you next time with conference number 4. We've got previews of week 4 all over the place. Michigan, Wisconsin, Texas A&M, Auburn. All sorts of games. USC and Utah playing. Florida, Tennessee. We will be posting those previews very soon. Hang on. We'll deliver, and we will see you soon.